I want to take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Alt21, the foreign exchange and hedging platform that saves you time and money on cross-border transactions. As a CEO, there are days when my calendar feels like a never-ending cascade of decisions, meetings, and problems to solve. Days when I can't remember if I've eaten lunch. The last thing I have time to think about is currency exposure. This is where Alt21 can help by taking the complexity out of foreign exchange. With their FX and hedging platform, you can lock in exchange rates and automate payments. And with their low fees, up to 90% less than competitors, you'll save money while freeing up your time for what really matters. If you want to stop juggling and start focusing on growing your business, head to alt21.com. That's alt21.com to find out more. Hello and welcome to Enter the Boardroom with Newroll. I'm your host, Oliver Cummings, CEO of Newroll, the board search specialist and market leader bringing science to the art of board hiring. Today's guest, Jurga Zilinskiene MBE, is a serial entrepreneur and leading AI thinker and practitioner. She is currently founder and CEO of 4 businesses, Guildhawk and Evernoon, 2 AI solutions businesses, and Today Translations and Today Academy, respectively providing translation services and education. She is also entrepreneur in residence at Sheffield Hallam University, ambassador at Be the Business, and steering group chair at the Corporate Council for Women and Commerce. Jurga, a huge welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
It's amazing, actually, when you listed all these components of my life, it felt a little bit strange. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'd love to talk to you about the board's role in Guildhawk's journey. One of the ideas I'm assessing about at the moment is how we can help more early stage founders and CEOs benefit from the transformational potential that boards can offer, and how we help board members add more value to those types of organizations, because you only need one transformational piece of input from your board a year to make the return on time invested higher than almost anything else. In episode 95, Nick Jenkins, the founder of Moonpig, gave a wonderful example of how a simple question from one of his board members on product pricing catapulted Moonpig on its journey towards becoming $1 billion business. In episode 107, Nadeem Zahawi shared how critical input from his board helped him seize the opportunity in a new geography when the received wisdom was to stay in the UK that set YouGov on its path to becoming $1 billion business. And way back in episode 4, Eric Collins shared some of my favorite illustrations of how an investor director can transform a small business going nowhere with a few key board level interventions that just unlocked their growth through product focus, unlocking distribution, and solving delivery pain points. Can you talk me through how you have used your board as a founder at Guildhawk that other founder, CEOs and board members working with growth companies might learn from?
I had an interesting journey towards creating a board in the first place. I had a board before even I knew I had a board, because I have advisors or mentors. So they were not necessarily officially engaged with the business, but delivering huge value looking back. And as you already mentioned, these impacts do not have to be massive. They just can be just a thought that you never actually, even if nobody brought to your attention, that transforms your business, or simply questioning your business, the direction that you're going, and introducing critical thinking, which is important in any success, because you could become stale, especially if you're running a business for a while. And a while could be a few years even. So we're not talking about a decade or something like this. So board is really important. Looking back, I would have started formalizing early on. But a little bit of issue I had, because my company has been going for 25 years, nearly a quarter of a century. It feels like a long time ago that I've set up. But at the same time, the learning has been quite gradual. And I think what is happening at the moment, there's so much more knowledge available. There are so many different organizations available that are raising awareness. And I think being part of them within Innovate UK and your particular organization as well, very good at raising awareness as well, and organizations such as Be the Business in terms of the importance of a role. Even I could give endless examples of where just a simple thought changes your direction completely when you are stuck, because it's very easy if you just simply don't voice your thoughts, or if you don't voice your concerns, that you could become stuck. And I think the best advice I would give to anybody to be very honest with yourself, with your board, and what you're trying to achieve. And I think one of the biggest issues that I think the entrepreneur community has, at least the people I worked with and I know, and even myself included, where I think we often confuse board with operations. Because especially for small to medium enterprises, everybody have to roll the sleeves up. And, everybody thinks that strategy and business strategy is something that we'll do later. But if we stop thinking about board as your extension of operation, if you just think about purely strategy advice, blue sky thinking, if you like, this is where they add value. And that little direction, little advice could have a massive impact on your business. And I'm feeling myself. And now actually having gone through quite a few transitions and challenging times when you have geopolitics, where you have change of your operation. I don't know personally how I would have faced it without my board.
Really interesting. I feel like I'm seeing that more than ever with a lot of these AI startups, where what you can see is they haven't clearly thought through their strategy and what they will do when someone else does exactly what they're doing. But you touched at the beginning there on the role played by some friends and advisors before you had a formal board. Tell me more about that, and can you give me examples of the sorts of value you got out of them and how you interacted with them?
I'm always curious. I always want to learn from people, and especially veterans of business. And I had a great fortune to meet some amazing business minds in my journey. So just sitting there and having a conversation over lunch and just voicing your concerns. And I remember just having one conversation with one of my amazing mentors, Clive Rankin, and he's an engineer by profession. And he worked with some really big organizations. And I sat with him and said, oh gosh, I wish people could just do what I told them to do. When you're managing people, when you're young, when you don't really know what you're doing. And he sat there and he just said, oh, Jurga, imagine that if everybody was just like you, imagine the competition. This is your great opportunity, and grow up as a leader. And I was thinking, wow. And then you carry on with that conversation. And then he gave more stories and he said that I was very similar when I was young. So I had this conversation with somebody else and they sort of passed me this advice. All of a sudden, you think, wow, this is a great piece of advice. So instead of moaning, you really think about how you can actually understand the situation better and, understand that people are different, and there are some leaders and there are some followers, and we need both. And they're equally important in business. And once you go through that thinking process and thinking, wow, this is amazing. Nothing changed. I'm still running the business, but my view has changed. And that view helped me to really engage with my team.
I had a similar, I suppose, transition moment when I left the world of investment, where I was used to having people who'd walk through brick walls just because I asked them to and because they were being paid, large amounts of money, and working in the first role, whereas working with people where they were still talented but wouldn't just walk through a brick wall because you asked them to, suddenly having to think about how do I get them to do the things I want them to do. And a person I had a conversation with put me on to Daniel Pink's book Drive, which has built on the work of Edward Dettier around these sort of core concepts of the surprising truth of what motivates us, being autonomy, mastery and purpose, and being really clear about thinking, how are you creating clarity of purpose? How are you creating clarity around the mastery of the skills they need in order to deliver on that purpose? And then are you giving them that autonomy to get on and do it? And I've just found that so incredibly helpful. You alluded earlier to the fact you wish you had formalized that forum earlier. What makes you say that?
I think that I really at the time did not understand the value they're bringing to the organization, because I was just gave an example now in terms of transformation personally, but there were instances where even in business direction, I was given amazing advice and I just didn't actively seek it. So it became not necessarily passive. I would ask those questions, but I should have made it more systematic. And that's what the board gives you. That systematic approach, you're constantly reviewing your strategy, it gives you space to think, explore ideas. And there's no such a thing as right and wrong in business, because you think that you have every single thing covered and then something happens and you'd have to change your plan. So therefore, formal board will give you that ability to have dynamic transition So you always go back to that point and then you just review it. And somebody would have dealt with something like this in the past as well. And you know that through that formality, you have a checkpoint. And you can see whether your plan worked, or even if you need to act very quickly as well. So it's all very well about inviting somebody to lunch or dinner, and there's no formal engagement, and there's no buying in as well. So although everybody wants you to succeed, but they don't really fully understand your business. But if you have a formal relationship, it changes completely. Then all of a sudden you have interest, you have buying in, you have full understanding, and you are going into that conversation with purpose.
I just had lunch with a founder CEO who was having some challenges with his board. And as we were talking, they stopped me and said, do you know what? It's so interesting. It's like we're talking about two parallel universes. I think about my board meetings as something to survive. And the picture you're painting there, and I think similar to the one you've just painted there, is of something that can be this incredible, amazing resource for me that I really would love to have. And yet at the moment, it's this horrendous stick where I get beaten once a month and think, okay, at the end of it, well, I've got another quarter to live. What catalyzed you to make that transition to actually formalize? When did you do that?
So we formally created a board, I would say about 10 years ago, 8 years ago. It wasn't big, and we kept changing people as well, depending on the transition and of the business and the requirement. But I think the first realization when we had the first member of our board and chairman, when actually he just simply sent me to be educated, he sent me to Harvard. So because I decided to do the transformation instead of, you go, darling, I think you need some TLC, off you go. And it was, I don't have time, I have business to run. I said, well, take care of it, don't worry. It's a long time, off you go. And it was transformational. You see, I would have never thought about it myself, just to take some time off and go and meet some other entrepreneurs in business and then to learn a great deal. So I came back a completely different person in terms of probably confidence and where I was going and being able to just explore ideas and just meeting other people in a more casual environment, not pure business environment. So where you can just sit down and academically explore ideas without any consequences. It's amazing. So that was the initial formation. And since then, I realized the value of it. And then I think on occasion as entrepreneurs, we do need a stick, but maybe not too big, not to kill us. Because sometimes you need that somebody to come in and rein you in a little bit, because we have a tendency of running away with ideas. However, I've heard of situations that sometimes that conflict is unnecessary as well. But end of the day, we have a choice. So do we want to be challenged? Do we want to have somebody to come in and just to give pure advice? Do we want, yes, men and women on your board? Looking back, no, I need people that actually challenge me. And that's how I grow, and that's how business grows.
Can you bring that to life with maybe some more detail? I mean, you transitioned from a consultancy to a technology business. Can you give me some moments of detail there that were really impactful?
How do you deal with people during that transition? Because all of a sudden your DNA is not necessarily completely changed. So DNA, the ethos may remain the same, but you need different people with different skill set and culture as well to join your organization. And how do you deal with that? For example, how do you bring your team together? Is it possible to do it as well? Because some people just would never transition. They will simply stay in business where you have a traditional component. When you are managing, when you're consultancy businesses, completely different attitude. When you're tech business, again, it's completely different situation. And being able to see the differences, but through the prism of somebody who's done it in the past, that really helped. So then you really look at the structure of organization. Then how do you spin out products? What impact does it have? All of a sudden, from us at Guildhawk managing projects, now we have a standalone SaaS platform that we're selling licenses. And we're selling to similar client base, but the buyer portfolio is completely different. How do you reposition? And this is where you guys helped us to recruit amazing member of our board who really helped to come in and really have this independent thinking, looking at the market space, saying, right, this is your competition. These are not your competition. This is what you stand out with. And you just need to build that confidence and giving us evidence as a team and giving us a face and direction. So we need somebody just to come in, and that's what the board members can give you.
But lots of echoes of my own experience there as well. I'll never forget the board saying to me that we didn't have enough clarity on where we were going to play and how we were going to win, to use the framework that Roger Martin has used in sort of episodes 85 and 86 of Enter the Boardroom. And it was so obvious once they said it, and then it gave me a really clear target to work towards, and they effectively had given me a scaffolding that I could then build on, whereas before they pointed that out, there was just this like enormous amount of things that I could work on, and it was quite hard to know where to prioritize my time, and I was sort of pushing water up a hill. Sounds like that's been a similar experience for you. It's that helping you prioritize where to focus when thinking about something like a go-to-market strategy, and that knowledge. What's intimidating sometimes is you don't know what you don't know, whereas when you've got someone who already has been through all that 10 times before, they know the market, they can just shortcut you to say, this is the part to focus on, or that's too broad, you're never going to create traction.
Exactly that, because as you can imagine, with language translation platform, everybody is your customer. Any industry needs it. But how do you narrow down and what is unique about us? And then somebody you bring in who actually, first of all, was using similar services in the past. He knows the pain points as well, but also we already had an idea of which direction we're going to go, because we work with highly regulated organizations. So either in manufacturing, mining, finances, so it's highly regulated space where precision is key. So we already sort of said, okay, this is where we are, because one thing we didn't want to do is to completely transform as an organization, because our product was built with specific purpose in mind. Andrew challenges that direction. So we already had workings of it, but he challenged it. He said, look, just go research, see what's your view on this. Is it the right strategy? And if there are any flaws in it, please let us know before we even start going into the market. And then let's help and work on the go-to-market strategy. And the value of it was huge. So imagine if we would have gone wrong direction, what would that mean? So all of a sudden now we have subscribers, we have people who are talking to us in some really major organizations, thanks to Andrew's direction and being involved in this.
How did Andrew advance your thinking? Can you bring that to life?
So first of all, he brought his knowledge of the area, because he formerly worked with very large organizations in the past. Probably for him was a little bit of learning point, because he's just joining SME. But what he immediately wanted to really help and apply his knowledge in a very different environment. And the aspect was that we already had something in the background. We knew that he didn't want to change, but we were open to be challenged. If he would have came back, said, look, you're in a completely different space. We were open-minded. Everybody on the board, we're open-minded. And so we really, if we bring somebody in, first of all, we need to trust that person, that they have enough competence and knowledge to be able to help us to set that direction, and then to provide that autonomy. So yes, this is the framework, but if you feel that we're missing out, and he did come back and he did say that, for example, where we didn't really look at is professional services initially. And then he came in and he said, look, you're really missing a point here. So there's an area for you that you could work. And, lo and behold, we're talking to professional services. So again, obviously professional services companies, they are very much with the compliance and this. We just simply haven't. So he identified even additional areas that we should be actually looking at.
Brilliant. What about on the AI front? You have sort of become positioned as a thought leader in the AI space. Has your board been helpful on that front? Board members everywhere are wrestling with AI because it's so new and everybody is learning. I have a friend who's an expert on AI and he says he's about 2 weeks ahead of everybody else. So curious to hear how the dynamic has worked on that front.
I definitely could say I'm lucky that I have, I would say, good understanding of the direction. I can't say that it was not without a challenge, because it's expensive, really expensive and highly risky area, especially for an SME and any organization for that matter. Because even if you look at Gartner's reports, if you want to just deploy a little bit of artificial intelligence, you're looking at minimum $500,000 minimum. It's just tiny bit of automation. And then you go with something more sophisticated, anything between 1 to 5 million and so forth. So even large corporations probably will struggle to actually invest. We invested a significant amount of money into building the platform itself. And everybody who says that the translation is easy, you don't know what you're talking until you tried it. So even ourselves, we said that sometimes, okay, right, how do you deal with that? But you raise this really valid point. And my personal feeling that we never, as a business altogether, but this is, I'm talking as an AI person, we never invested enough money in technology. We never give enough space for technology to really be integrated in our businesses. And of course, that translates into the board questions. However, there is also a requirement to understanding the risk level that you're investing in and what are you trying to achieve. I was very lucky because my board comes with a bit of background in tech. My directors have built systems in the past, so they have understanding, so we have a higher tolerance level. But even at our level, sometimes there was a question, wow, we still need to add on. We think we finished this, something else come in. And it's always a challenge. And it's a dynamic challenge that is evolving because technology is evolving so fast. So there is a big misunderstanding in terms of how much we need to commit and how much we need to tolerance level. But I would now go back and I would say more on, so this I'm talking from technology level, but as a business owner, as a board member, we need them to challenge us because technology, when we're building things, we can get into rabbit holes. We can start reinventing the wheel. We need that conflict 100% because neither side is perfect in terms of how to deal with technology because there are far too many unknowns. Even today when everybody's talking, agents deployment, but agent is a black box. We don't know what results can we get. And all of a sudden people are thinking, wow, it's going to transform how we're operating. So we need that conflict, but sometimes it gets too much. But then if we could achieve that balance between tech and the board, it's great because both sides need. Because a friend of mine wrote an amazing book about geeks and suits. And he said there's always sort of geeks always need money to develop technology, but board and suits need money to sell technology. They need technology to sell the products. But this is always about a balance. And I think luckily in our case, because of my tech background, I'm able to sit on both camps. So I can sit as a business owner and with a board and understand their concerns. And then I can sit with my team as a CTO and speak through the situation and challenges they have and identifying where are those rabbit holes and just pull them out.
That's interesting because so it sounds like your board are playing a sort of counterpoint role to your leading technology thinking. They are sort of keeping you with the 10,000 feet view and challenging when you're going too deep in an area and challenging you to think about the return on investment. Whereas I guess some boards, I remember one of our advisory board members 3-4 years ago actually said, what are you doing on GPT before GPT became a big thing? And we're like, what's GPT? And so they were actually pushing us ahead of the curve, which was really helpful. But it sounds like you get less of the sort of the forward pushing and more of the counterbalanced because that's already an area you're strong in.
I need that. I really need. I love technology. As I said, don't give me food, just give me tech. So I need it. For me personally, I need that balance and I don't need to be pushed because I'm naturally curious. I was experimenting with quantum long ago and GPT was on our radar well before it was released. We're working with universities. I sit on the board, as you mentioned, we're looking at the future skills, what we need. We're looking at the curriculum, what is still applicable. So again, going back to original question, it's a bit like a relationship. Board, entrepreneurs, business. What kind of things do we need as a unit to create a perfect, or as perfect as possible, business? What do we need? If everybody is the same, it's not going to work. Because if I didn't have the enthusiasm for technology, then I may need somebody revolutionary to come in and say, like, hey, Jurga, we really need to invest in technology. 100%. If I didn't have people to say, hey, Jurga, is it really, do we still need to develop this? Is it really so essential? Is it experimental or is it already actually we can deploy it in a commercial space? Because we do a lot of research and development work as well. And then, okay, and what is the expectation? And then if it fails, what is the impact on business? If it succeeds, obviously, what is the impact on business? So you kind of need to have that dynamic of the board where you need both. You need somebody who actually more advanced, somebody who is a bit more cautious. But I think the most important thing is respect for each other.
One of the hardest things I found as an independent non-executive compared to my time as an investor director is the lack of a network to support and challenge my thinking in the boardroom. I hope that Enter the Boardroom goes some way to filling that gap. But if you want a more structured, personal space in which to share boardroom challenges and opportunities, I'd recommend our new 12-month NED Mastermind program. Over 6 sessions, you'll meet with a highly accomplished group of 6 to 8 board directors to brainstorm and benchmark boardroom approaches. In each 2-hour session, one member of the group will share their issue or opportunity, for example, how to handle a disengaged CEO. After this, the rest of the group will ask you clarifying questions before offering their ideas. To celebrate our milestone of 100,000 Enter the Boardroom downloads, I'm delighted to offer a 10% discount to all our listeners who sign up between now and the end of March. Head to plus.newroll.com and apply the code ENTER, all lowercase, at checkout. Can we talk about how your board has helped you think through your geographic distribution? Because you have built an amazingly global set of customers. I often challenge smaller businesses to win in your core market first, because the stress of trying to cover multiple time zones is so great, and you'll get much higher return on your time invested if you try to create, I talk about ponds, if you create a splash in a pond, the ripples effect felt everywhere, whereas if you create a splash in the sea, no one notices. Now, I guess with your business as a translation business, it's by its nature global, but really interested to hear how the board have helped you think through that global versus market focus.
We are global business by definition because it's the nature of what we do. We work with 3,000 contractors globally, but we do have key markets because you cannot spread yourself too thin. And the decisions that we had to make was quite challenging, because where is the next growth market for us? Which vertical we're going to be positioning in? Even if we're operating in Hong Kong, the United States, and the UK, these are our key 3 areas where we are operational. But at the same time, we work with global corporations, so they're based everywhere. We need to be able to support it. So for us, it's about the operational centers and where we actually, as a business, how do we focus? And Hong Kong was a tricky one. And of course, it still remains a challenging market because we're still at the beginning of exploring the opportunities there. Our main focus is the United States and Europe. But at the same time, Middle East started to bubble up as well. So in terms of the need for our services. So you're right. Focus is absolute key. We always look very carefully if we say, okay, right, we go into this market. For example, with Hong Kong, it's a long term. So we know that we're building something there, but it's a long term. And plus with the market requirement, how it's operating. So we knew that it's going to be not an immediate conversion. It's going to happen something later. So we know that we are building it, but gradually. And we're still focusing on our key markets. So I think it is important to make sure that you do not split your resources too thin, because it's impossible. Even in our case, we're operating globally. Even there, we still have focus geographies, focused verticals, focused areas where we are operating and knowing exactly where we're not.
So can we drill down there? You said the US is one of your focus markets. Lots of startups have the US on their roadmap. You do the numbers in a bottom-up spreadsheet. It's easy to build a very exciting business case. How have you gone about attacking that market, and how have the board helped you be better in the way that you've approached that?
Already a significant revenue comes from the United States for us. So it's a significant number. Hence, we won the Queen's Award for international trade, and it comes from the United States primarily. But we do work for other organizations. And because of the nature of work and global organizations, they have headquarters everywhere. So our strategy for the US was we traveled with our clients to the US. We did not go there and say, hey, we're here, we're trying to establish business. It's very expensive to win that trust. But we traveled with our clients. That's how we ended up in the United States. And now we're adding more, since we generate revenue, now we are focusing more on the market because we know. But at the same time, it's not the US, it's actually certain states that we're working in. So we're not working across the US. So we're focusing on specific states. We had actually a board member with very strong US knowledge. And at the same time, our strategy has been, so yes, that was hugely important. And our current board members have more global knowledge. So it's not just specifically with the US. It's interesting actually when we have a little bit of a conflict between pushing for the United States market more than looking at alternatives, because you could over leverage yourself as well. You could probably put too many eggs in a single basket. That's not very healthy either. So you need a little bit of diversification, especially in our case. But again, depends on the business. For us, geography is diversification of risk as well as of capitalization of opportunity. And that's what we always assessing. So in terms of we're going to really push a little bit more and where the opportunity is going to be happening next, and then looking even at the vertical situation, which verticals, like we just said, that some organizations have been affected already with some of the decisions that have been made, and every single business have been made. I don't need to spell out exactly what's happening at the moment with our economies across the world. So and then being able to leverage on certain economic ups and downs helps to de-risk the business as well.
I want to go back to, you talked about bringing in Andrew and the value he's brought. I mean, the way you use your board strikes me as at the sophisticated end of the spectrum for an organization of the size and stage you're at. Really interested to hear how you went about looking for Andrew, the sort of the process, and what a CEO founder listening to this might find instructive if it's something they're thinking of doing.
I think one of the things we always look at what kind of things we need at this stage of business in order to go to the next stage. And do we have skills at the strategic level to execute that vision? And that's how it all starts. So we finished this stage. Now we're going to go into the next stage. What are we missing? And one thing we were missing on our board, specifically go-to-market, specifically branding, and specifically in those geographies, area of expertise as well. So the decision was made, right, we need now somebody to join our board who has these skills, understanding, in order to take us to the next level. That's how it all came about. So therefore, we knew exactly geography, vertical, the pain point that we're trying to resolve, and what will be the vision. And that was key. And also, the great organization helped us to narrow down, because obviously you could start with a list which is too big, but then you go through the process of saying, okay, these are critical 2 or 3 skills that I'm looking for, and the rest is nice to have. I can live without it, or maybe understanding of it. And that's what helps to go through that process. If you go in just to build a board without strategy, it feels like it's the wrong place to start. So you kind of have to know more or less what you're trying to achieve. And your board members will change as well, because there's a use force in life for all of us at the right time, at the peak time. And there is a use by date for every one of us. So therefore, we should be expecting that some of the board members will change as well as the business will grow. So that change is important. And that independence is key as well when you come in with a complete independent view too. So having that balance as well, of course. So when you have investors, it's a bit tricky, yeah, but because that independence is, again, could be a question. But at the same time, I think just keeping an eye on making sure that board remains independent and not operational.
It's really interesting what you've just articulated there of having that vision and the plan and the skills that you need to execute on that plan, and then doing a gap analysis versus what you have is, in my mind, best practice of what you can do when running that process. What I observe sometimes is organizations don't yet have clarity on that vision piece. And that was one of the reasons we launched this pop-up board concept, where people can get a board on demand for just a 2-hour discussion to help them start to formulate that vision. Because I think for many organizations, that can be a really difficult thing to do. Why do you think you were so well advanced with that? What had really helped you get that clarity around that vision?
I think I'm a coder.
That's interesting.
Yes, I don't think I can operate without. A few times in normal business experience, found that sometimes if you go in without at least an idea what you try to achieve and a structure, you may be open to change. But if you go without structure, you will get a result, but will not be necessarily what you're looking for. So objective, what am I missing? This is the structure. This is what more or less think the board or any kind of strategy in business should look like. And then you go with it and see how much you can achieve. Normally it's about 80-90%. So it's okay. But I'm a great fan of investing time and just putting some thoughts together. And once you have those thoughts together, you can address this with your boards, with maybe some of your colleagues as well. It's not just at the board, but also you have your managers, you have your team. You can have your sort of unofficial testing of your ideas, whether you're going the right direction.
So I'm fascinated now to hear how your coder mindset worked through the assessment and selection phase. You got, I guess, presented with a long list of 10 or so people who we thought were the most interesting people for you. Talk me through your lessons of selecting people. We just recorded an episode with Dr. Tomasz Chamorro-Premasic, who uses an algorithm of sorts where he's looking for intelligence, drive, and honesty. The things that he was looking to measure. I'm really interested to hear what you used for selecting people and being confident that you were selecting the right ones.
It's fascinating that component we talk about culture. So we actually with us in Guildhawk, and now the rest of the team has, that's what Andrew said, we have the same DNA but different products, which is amazing, I thought. So it starts with actual leadership. We always look for the quality of leadership. And then trust, looking at their background and what jobs they've done in the past, what kind of achievements they've made, and also being able to collaborate. So this is the bit which I talk about, that balance. Collaboration is key in achieving the balance that you need. So somebody who is happy to have an argument with you, a lively one, but to respect each other. Say, right, okay, we agree to disagree or agree to unite or we change our opinions. But we respect of each other. And that's the aspect of collaboration that I know I cannot be right all the time. I feel sometimes I should be, but I cannot be, it doesn't happen.
Most of the time.
Well, at least 51%, I think. That's good enough. But I think it's sort of, these are the qualities that we're looking at. But these are the soft qualities are actually very often overlooked. For me, this was important through this selection. It's a bit tricky to look for those values, but during the interview process, you do get the feel for it. And then when I was going through the hard facts, CVs and presentations and everything else, and initially we had actually a lot of interest in our position. So we had about 30 or 40 shortlists, but we allowed this to happen. And I'm so glad I did that process because we almost knew whom we wanted to have. And I'm so glad that I was forced to look at broader candidates. So thank you for that.
That's interesting. So did you think you wanted someone else, but then the process, that's a really common phenomenon that I observe. People think on paper they want one thing, and then when they start to meet people, they suddenly realize actually there are other things they hadn't considered.
It's exactly that. So in fact, I aim too low. So that allowed us to really get a person who actually brought a lot that we needed as a business, as an organization. So it opened a completely new horizon. So thank you for that. And so this is a bit which I was going. So then I had 3 key things I was looking for. And I was just looking ruthlessly for the skill and then anything nice to have just in case, because I ended up initially I wanted to have only 5 pre-interviews before we go into the final stage, but I had 7. Because I just wanted to meet because it was just too close to call. I'm glad that I went through that process. It was actually time well invested.
Jurga, time is flying. But before we come on to the lightning round, just one last thing I'd love to get your insights on of how you think about performance managing your board. You have been through different board members. You've cycled through people, and lots of founder CEOs find that quite difficult, and they end up stuck with too many people on the board because they didn't put provisions in the documents where they had investor directors to say once your percentage drops below 10%, you come off the board so that it's not a discussion. But those that you've brought on and hired, people tend to, in my experience, keep them too long, and they get people who would have been great for 1 year or 2 years, but end up being good or average for 6 years or longer. What's your approach to that?
I don't have a system for this one. I can't really say that this is 3 years, 2 years, 5 years. However, you feel disengagement at some point and value creations being dropped. And it's not good for the business, not good for the board member either. So it comes almost to a natural conclusion of the relationship. And then you have a conversation and say, well, it actually depends how you handle it. But normally it should actually end up in almost a natural conclusion. I think we reached the end of the road.
Can we imagine that I'm the board member that stopped adding value and you've called me up to have that conversation? How are you going to handle that? What do you say to me?
First of all, the contribution during the board meetings, and where's a little contribution, and is anybody listening to your opinion? And if nobody's listening to your opinion, why? Let's go through it.
Wow. Okay. And okay, let's say I'm a self-aware board member. I guess my response is, well, I guess I just don't have the expertise to be adding what you need right now. But if I'm not a self-aware board member, because that probably makes it quite easy for you. But if I'm not a self-aware board member, I'd probably respond defensively and say, well, they're all, so conceited, they're not listening.
Yes, so they're not listening, but at the same time, let's look at the background of those people that they're not listening. So they've done X, Y, Z in their lives, and they're coming from this angle, alignment with where we're going as an organization. Do you think that we're still having the situation? Is it possible to make them listen to you? Why do you think they're not listening to you?
Gosh, it's terrifying, Jurga. I can feel I'm about to get cut. So you coach them effectively through that discussion there and try to allow them to reach the conclusion that actually they're not adding value to you anymore and that they should probably step.
And this is my genuine interest because I want to understand what's happening. So there was effectiveness. Is that a natural end or a person just lost interest? There's also some board members have too many interests in so many different areas as well. And for example, you feel the commitment waning. You could, if you pay attention. And then once you go through that process, normally you come to natural conclusion. Well, at least that happened in our case, so I don't know.
But it's interesting that it's required by the sounds of it on each of those occasions, you to initiate that discussion rather than them. Because I certainly, in my experience as a board member, have initiated a discussion where I've said to, but I don't think I'm adding value anymore and I think you should get rid of me.
I had the situation before as well. That's normal. I'm addressing more the situation where it doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. When it happens is great.
Yeah.
Because then the conversation is not that difficult, but it's a bit more difficult when somebody just wants to stay. I think that's more difficult situation.
Jurga, time has flown, which means it's time for the lightning round where I'm going to ask you a brief question and ask you for a quick response if you're ready. Best book every board member should read and why?
One thing is Flying Without a Net by Thomas DeLonge. The reason being, it will change your life and make you more tolerant of everyone.
Boardroom behavior that irritates you most?
Not listening.
Most valuable board ritual?
Going for a drink.
Most significant professional insight?
I would say turning mirror to yourself. It's about first looking at yourself, your behavior, and then looking at others.
Worst professional advice you've ever received?
It's about a situation that there is no such a thing as free lunch. Then normally I actually get more from free lunch than the lunch I pay for.
What have you changed your mind on about boards over time?
It's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
When was the last time you got a significant judgment call wrong in the boardroom? And what did you learn?
I would say that being too optimistic about timelines and actually providing more time sometimes for things that are not necessarily concrete, that takes time to achieve things, timelines.
How are you better today as a board member than when you started?
I respect advice.
And finally, 3 things our listeners should take away from this podcast.
Your job is to be an adjudicator, but also make sure that you make decisions. The next one, if you made a decision, stick with it.
Jurga, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and wisdom.
Pleasure. Thank you.